Hello, I'm Elaine Sanchez, founder of Caregiver Help, and I am with Brenna Baucum, who is a certified financial planning professional. And we have been doing this series together on life after caregiving and going solo. And there is so much information about this. And Brenna, your experience, your knowledge, your expertise in this is an incredible gift to me and to the people that will be watching this. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yes. So today we're going to be talking about long-term care and future planning. And this is a really difficult topic for a lot of people. Um, when my husband and I got married in 1996, right before we got married, I said, I love you with my whole heart, but I will never do for you what my mother has done for my dad, as much as I love you.
Mm.
And we are going to buy long-term care insurance. And that was that was kind of part of the marriage contract. And it
Okay.
was like, he was older than me. And when I first started going out with him, my mother said, he sounds like a very nice man. Enjoy him, have a nice dinner, and for God's sakes, don't marry him. Because you could be a young woman taking care of an old man for a very long time.
Mm.
And so that was watching what she did to care for my dad
Mm.
and thinking about the possibility. And I loved him enough to take that risk. And 30 years later, we are still living happily ever after. So we have been lucky. We have not needed long-term care. But I have, excuse me, I have never, some people say, well, you spend so much money on that and you've never used it. And I said, I have never grieved the fact that we didn't have a terrible auto accident
All right.
because we paid for
Exactly.
car insurance all of these years and now we're getting no benefit from it,
Hmm.
So that is kind of my take on long-term care. And
Yeah.
then obviously there are so many things to talk about. So
Yeah.
I want to turn that back to you and let's maybe start with a bigger picture
Sure. Yeah.
and talk about financial planning and thinking about who will take care of you. Where do
Yeah.
you want to be cared for if you reach a point that you can't care for yourself any longer?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is such you described the role that insurance should play so clearly of transferring risk and worry. That
Yes,
is something that long-term care or any other type of insurance does. And
yes,
so we can talk a little bit about the long-term care insurance landscape and how it's changed over the years too. And this section might be helpful.
yes.
Um, I think in this time of transition, when someone
Mhm.
is newly navigating life solo, one of the first things that I encourage folks to do is find their phone a friend.
Yes.
So whether that is, and maybe that's part of your getting a ducks in a row or general caregiving, but who is the person that you talk to
Mhm.
daily, if not weekly,
Mhm.
to check in on,
Mhm.
on your health, how you're doing, just a check in. And my grandmother, she had friends from kindergarten, and when she was in her late 80s, early 90s, they were all named Betty. And she would be calling all the Bettys, checking in
That's
on
so
how they were
funny.
doing.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And that brought an immense amount of comfort to them as being able to just check in and take care of one another, take care of
Yes.
their people. So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
something you can do without any kind of product, legal document, anything
Yes.
else is finding that
Yes.
that
Yes,
person.
yes. So I have a friend who lost her husband maybe 6 months ago,
Mhm.
and she has another friend who recently lost her husband.
Mhm.
And so they were talking about this and talking about feeling safe and saying, what if I fall in the night,
Yeah,
or what if I
exactly.
don't get home? So they decided to call each other every morning when they get up and just say, good morning, made it through the
Mhm.
night, and then call them when you're in for the evening before you go to bed. And there, it was just that security of knowing that somebody wanted to hear from you and that
Mhm.
somebody was depending on you, to be that person. So
Yeah.
I've called them caregiving buddies, but I love the idea of phone a friend.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah. I
Okay.
think that's a great step one. And
Uh-huh.
then of course when we think beyond that, we think about the level of care, certainly for the people watching this, that they
Yes.
were giving to their loved one.
Yes.
And now who is going to care for them?
Yes.
And there are a myriad of ways to have receive this care, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
through in-home care
Mm-hmm.
and or a family person who comes in, a professional in-home care or family that comes in usually is the first steps that I
Mm-hmm.
see.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about this in one of our other videos. If it's in-home care, that's relatively they have a process for how to
Mm-hmm.
get started. If it's a
Mm-hmm.
professional coming in, they have a process, they have questions to ask. There are clear expectations
Right.
all along the way. And that is always my recommendation for people
Mm-hmm.
who are trying to arrange something with family. Do the
Yes.
same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Very
Oh,
clear
interesting.
expectations,
Yes.
very clear, and I even encourage, if it's possible, some level of compensation
Yes.
for that person.
Yes.
If that's
Mhm.
part of your picture, that makes everything a little bit easier, a little
Yeah.
less likely to become resentful, a little less overwhelming, where you're saying it's going to be X days a week. I really need this, this, and this. And then you allow your family member to say, yeah, I can do that. Or I don't think I can do all that. Maybe I can do half of that.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Mm-hmm.
bring in a professional to do the other half.
Mm-hmm.
So I think having clarity on what would be really important to you is a good first step, but also being flexible if
Mm-hmm.
that clarity, if that person you're asking is family, to meet them where they're at too. I think that's a big
Mm-hmm.
important piece.
I think that's a really good point, and maybe not actually feeling like they have to do all of the work themselves. Maybe you could ask them, could you coordinate this for us?
Mhm,
For me,
mhm.
I guess at this point, if you're by yourself. So
Yeah,
I need someone to come in and, just help fix meals, help clean the house a little bit, drive me to a doctor's appointment. And this is not cheap, but it is a lot less expensive than going into an active retirement or even assisted living facility, as long as a person wants to stay in their home and is capable of managing most of it. Yesterday, you mentioned daily money managers too, and I have talked about this. Um, if we have time, I'd like to go back and talk about how do you check these people out when
yeah,
we talk about building our team and the different types of people who can help us.
good idea.
But let's talk about aging in place now, rather than going into active retirement or
Mhm.
assisted living. So, what are your thoughts on this?
So the couple of things I want to always encourage my clients when we're having this conversation to
Mhm.
think through is aging in place is mo I would say 80% of my client families want to age in place. One of my client calls
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
going out toes up. She wants to stay in her home until she goes out toes up. And so then we talk about what does that really mean?
Uh-huh.
And so for many people, the home
Mhm.
that they are in now is a home they have been in for 30, 40, 60 years
Mhm.
in some
Mhm.
cases.
Mhm.
And so those types of homes require maintenance, even if it's a small,
Yes.
even if it's a
Yes.
single level, even if the property is small.
Mhm.
There's roofs to be replaced, there's
Mhm.
driveways that need to be
Mhm.
repaved, there's
Mhm.
just that maintenance that comes along. So
Mhm.
that to me, we sometimes think about the emergency fund and needing to have that as
Yes.
for people who are working.
Yes.
I am a big proponent of having a cash position for people who are moving into needing to care
Yes.
for a home that they've had for some time. So that,
Yes.
and there's all the more obvious changes might be ramps, grab bars,
Mhm.
threshold,
Mhm.
neutral
Mhm.
threshold change,
Mhm.
those kind of things that take money and
Mhm.
planning, and obviously much nicer to do those before you need them than
Yes.
in the moment when you need them.
Yes. Yes.
So those are some of the considerations in addition to what we talked about with bringing in
Mhm,
someone of
mhm,
wanting to stay in place.
mhm, mhm. I think, again, another Aunt Jean story. When we moved her from Florida to Oregon, she was considering renting a place,
Mm.
just renting her own apartment or condo or even buying something. And we talked about it and said, well, I'm the only person here. And so I was thinking about that is going to be a big burden on me because she's going to be by herself. So,
Mhm.
and she decided to quit driving, so she had sold her car. So,
Oh
when we
gosh. Yeah.
started, yeah, so when we started talking about, well, where could she live? And, we started talking about a place like Hidden Lakes or, Capitol Manor. These are
Mhm.
local, in Salem. And her first thought was, well, everybody there is so old.
I hear that all the time.
All the time. And at this point, Jean was 80,
Yep.
But
Hmm.
then when we talked about it, and I said, Jean, you had friends in Florida that you could call up anytime, that you could walk with, that you could meet. And even though they were dying and moving away to be closer to their children, she still had her community there. So, I really encourage people if you're going to bring mom or dad to live close to you, you need to look at your life and see how they're going to fit into it.
Hmm.
Because how much time do you actually have to make sure that they are getting the right food, that their medications are managed, that they aren't lonely or bored or, you know, in the shower on the floor with the water running and they can't get up and so we were actually, I had a gathering of friends yesterday celebrating a birthday, and they were talking about going into one was helping another friend to choose a place to go into because clearly she needed more help than she could manage and she was lonely.
Sure.
So they went to the first place they went to, they looked around and it wasn't the age, but my friend said there was no one in there that looked like her. Not meaning that, they didn't dress the same, but there was nobody that had the same kind of lively expression or
Mm.
people that were engaged, and there were people that were just kind of looking out of windows, and then they went to another place and it's like, oh, this is it. It was
Yeah.
lively, it was active, there was laughter.
Mm.
And so, not all of these places are created equally. It's pretty easy to move from one active retirement community to another. It's not so easy to make the right decision about assisted living or skilled nursing care or memory care.
Yeah.
So, do we want to talk about that? And do we want to talk about paying for it?
Sure. And I think those are the decisions. I think one of the things I always try to emphasize for anyone, whether they're partnered or single or as you age,
Mhm.
as much as possible, retaining agency and joy over your life
Yes.
and making some of those decisions while you are still, I
Yes.
mean, and if people who are watching this just went through a caregiving experience with someone, they saw that we talked about this a little bit before, the step down
Hmm.
of what happens when you lose a
Yes.
certain faculty, when a part of your cognition goes.
Yes.
So being able to make some of those decisions, particularly around a big move out of the primary home
Mhm.
into something like a retirement community, I think is something that maybe rather than feeling like it is a admission or a step back and I don't want
Mhm.
to, but
Mhm.
instead an empowerment, an exercise of your
Mhm.
agency. And that is particularly true when those facilities, those communities have a continuum of care.
Yes, that's true.
So they used to be called CCRCs or
Yes.
continuing care retirement
Yes.
communities. Now they're called Life Path. communities, I
Oh,
think.
that's new for me. I thought they were still CCRCs.
I think we all still call them that, but they're trying to rebrand. But they, those communities, typically there's a large buy-in,
Yes,
there's a monthly rent you pay,
yes,
and they take care of you for the rest of your life,
right.
even if you cannot continue to pay that monthly expense. So that for some people, for you and Alex,
Mhm,
long-term care insurance
mhm,
was a part of kind of
mhm,
solving the unknown of
mhm,
long-term
mhm,
needs.
mhm,
For others, moving into a CCRC, we'll just still
mhm.
call them that, tends to be another
Yeah,
way to
that's
meet
that
that
same
need.
kind of assurance. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And not, I think you're sharing earlier in one of our earlier conversations around your desires to not put this on the shoulders of your
Right,
kids
right.
is almost universal. I don't know anyone who says, yes, I really want my kid to be the one who is helping me as my faculty, as I lose my
Right.
faculties.
I remember I met one
Oh,
man.
yes, that one person you shared in one of our other videos.
One person out there is crazy. No, I'm not going to say he's crazy, just maybe ill-informed.
Yes, and
Yeah.
again, with the person who is signed up for that job not having any idea that they're signed up
Yeah,
for that
yeah.
role is hard. That's what I see a lot of times when I had one client and we were considering a CCRC and
Mhm.
looking at that, and they are expensive.
Yes,
They are expensive because there is kind of this
yes.
exchange of guarantee. So a more traditional type of retirement community
Hmm.
might have levels in care. So
Hmm.
you can bring in someone to, eventually come in a couple of times, or you
Hmm.
can offload things like
Hmm.
laundry,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then the next level is maybe some kind of a skilled nursing on the property
Hmm.
if you
Hmm.
need more intensive care or memory care. And all of
Hmm.
those come at a different price that you pay
Right,
incrementally as you need it.
right.
And so both of those I see as relatively smooth transitions
Yes,
for the people that live there. They're not, doesn't mean they're
yes,
easy, but
yes.
there's kind of a known quantity to it, which is what you don't have when
Hmm.
you're living at home. There's
That's
not
true.
something quite as finite, and especially if it's a family member who is the caregiver, there's not something as finite as, okay, 2 of 5 ADLs, those
Hmm.
activities of daily living,
Hmm.
you can't
Hmm.
meet those now. That means you need this level of care.
Right.
That
And
is
then
much
finding
more
that
intense.
place,
Exactly.
that is tricky. Now there are organizations who can help you. There's an alliance or an association, the National Placement Referral Alliance.
Hmm.
And these are people like similar to certified financial planners. They are ethically and morally committed to finding the right place for
Mhm.
a person to live. And so, yet another Aunt Jean story. We picked her up at the airport. She flew from Florida to Oregon, took her out for a nice dinner. The next morning, we were going into Starbucks to meet a couple of friends. She tripped on a rug, fell, and broke her hip.
The
And
first day, oh my gosh.
yeah, the first day, and her all of her belongings were still on the moving truck.
Ugh.
And so I was standing in the ER, and they were saying, um, who's her physician? What kind of insurance does she have? Does she have any allergies? We're going to operate on her later today, and then 3 days from now, you're going to need to put her into rehab. And where do you want us to send her?
Oh my gosh.
And at this point, I thought rehab is where people went for alcohol and drug problems. You know?
Hmm.
And it's like, I don't know. Why don't you tell me? And they said, no, we can't do that. We can only give you a list of places where beds are available, and then
Mm.
you have to go check them out. So I found the place with the nicest, most engaging marketing manager, the prettiest carpet, and the nicest drapes, and that's the place that I chose, not knowing the questions that I needed to ask.
Yeah.
And so, that is part of our program. How do you pick the right place? How do you
Hmm.
make sure that they're going to get the care that they need? Because these places are not all created equally.
Absolutely.
So
And I know
having,
that's your expertise. That piece is
yes,
definitely
yes.
in your
Ooh,
wheelhouse.
and it really and truly is a difficult thing, and it's hard to do in the middle of a crisis situation.
Hmm.
So, if you have professionals in any field or every field that can help you and you know where to turn, it doesn't make the journey easy, but it can make it more manageable.
Hmm.
And just disclaimer here, I do not sell long-term care insurance. I'm not representing anybody who does.
Nor do I.
Yeah, so, just putting this out here, but one of my closest friends, she had long-term care insurance, and her husband had Parkinson's and dementia, Lewy body's dementia along with it. So she cared for him. She went through this whole process with him of caring for him herself and then having people come in. She had pretty much 24-hour a day care.
Mhm.
And then she had him in assisted living. He was very happy there. And this facility had a memory care unit attached to it. And he was wandering out of whenever there was nobody at the receptionist desk, he would just slip out.
Mhm.
So she put him in the memory care part of the facility, thinking that he would be safer there. And they assured her that there were going to be activities, that he would still be engaged, that he could go back and have breakfast with his breakfast buddies. It wouldn't be any different, except he would just be more secure. And about 3 weeks after he had been there, she went in to see him and he was crying. And she said, "What's wrong? What's wrong? What's going on?" He said, "I just don't know what I did to become incarcerated. I just don't know why I'm here."
Heartbreaker.
Yeah, and so, it is so important to, even if it is a continuous care, that you go in yourself, you have lunch with them, you drop in when they aren't expecting you,
Yep.
you say, "When are your activities?" You check these things out. She ended up moving him to another facility, which was very good, but it was traumatic for him. It was traumatic for her. And the last year of his life, her long-term care insurance covered $190,000 of
Wow.
his care, and she paid $60,000 out of her own pocket.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think these are things that people need to be aware of,
Hmm.
and the importance, if you're looking at financial planning and security for the caregiver after her loved one passes away. This is a big deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And this is a great segue to what does this generally cost? Which, again,
Yeah.
your viewers may have some very acute idea of given
Yeah.
their recent experience. But, and then how do most people figure out how to pay for it? So,
Right.
does that feel like a good
Yeah, let's
next
talk
place to
about
go?
that.
Okay. So, there is a really wonderful resource that's free online called the Genworth Cost of Care Calculator.
Yes.
I love that. And you can go,
Yes.
so you could just Google Genworth calculator and it would
Uh-huh.
probably pop up. And it will show you very specific to your zip code,
Uh-huh.
the cost for in-home care, the cost for nursing care, the cost for
Wow.
skilled nursing,
Okay.
nursing home, every
Yeah.
level, whether it's a private room or a semi-private room, gives you all sorts of information.
Wonderful.
And you can even kind of fast forward it out. So you can say, okay, here's the rates as of today.
Okay.
What are they going to be in 5 years, 10
Yeah.
years?
Yeah.
So you can kind of project because, like we talked about in another video, inflation around healthcare expenses is so much higher than
Mm-hmm.
just standard
Mm-hmm.
CPI. So, so that gives you a sense because that gives you a sense of what your care needs might be specific to where you are,
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to be much more expensive in San Francisco or New
Mm-hmm.
York City
Mm-hmm.
than it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be in Salem, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure that you're planning for your need is
Yeah.
key. And then the ways that I see, typical ways that I see people pay for this is either through some type of insurance product
Yes.
or through self-funding from their investments.
Yes.
And so I will start with the latter and say if you are considering self-funding,
Mm-hmm.
that you stress test your plan very thoroughly before doing so, meaning, like we talked about in one of our other videos, how much do we think this is going to cost? Use that Genworth cost of care calculator, project out 10, 15, 20 years, whatever we think it's going to be.
Mhm.
And then from there, have that inform our living expenses today and our fun expenses and all of those things. So we're not
Mhm.
spending, we're not borrowing from tomorrow's bucket
Mhm.
today and ending up in the, I mean, you said it earlier, usually a little more money means a nicer place, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And you don't want to end up in the not nice place in these
Right.
years.
Right.
So that's one, that's the self-funding side. And then the insurance side, it's like most insurance where it requires some level of qualification.
Right.
So if you're in your 60s, 70s and you don't already have some type of insurance
Mhm.
policy, it can be very expensive.
Mhm.
Even if you are in your 50s, it is
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
expensive.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the long-term care insurance landscape has changed a lot in the past 20 years.
Mhm.
So they used to be policies that where the premium was relatively reasonable, the benefits were quite robust,
Mhm.
and the premiums would only change every once in a while.
Right.
And then as people got older and started using their plans, the insurance company said, "Well, wow, like people are using these plans, we need
Yeah.
more in premiums to help cover just the incredible cost of care."
Right.
So I have several clients who have had premium increase letters that they receive every few years from
Yeah.
the long-term care insurance policies.
Mhm.
And they say, you can either change the inflation amount if you want to keep your
Yeah.
premium the same, or change the benefit amount, or
Yeah.
they give you all sorts of ways to try to retain your premium. Or they
Mhm.
say if you don't do any of these things, your premium is increasing by 1, 10, 40, 50%. So it
Whoa.
can be a lot. And what a conversation I just had with an independent insurance agent on this, I said, what's going on? What are you seeing with
Mhm.
primarily long-term care insurance policies right now? And he said, these types of policies, the premiums might start a little lower,
Mhm.
but within 5, 10 years, you're paying more in a premium than you might through some other way of getting this insurance because of those increases over time. So they don't have any guarantee to fix the premium.
Wow.
So I said, well,
Wow.
what are the other
What are the other
insurance?
options?
Yeah,
Yeah.
what are the other choices? And so the other options are they're insurance more like a life insurance policy where
Mhm.
there's a death benefit. But part of the rider that's involved in it says if you need to use this money for long-term care, you
Oh,
can.
yeah.
So it's kind of like you have a long-term care pool in there that you
Right.
can draw from during your life.
Right.
And if you don't need it, then some benefits will go to your beneficiaries, which people, like you were saying earlier, people
Yeah.
saying, I don't want to pay into a policy I never get any benefit from. This
Right.
might scratch that itch a little bit.
Oh, that's interesting. So you buy a life insurance policy, let's say it's $1 million,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And then how much of that could you borrow from the principal? It'd be like taking money out of the bank, right?
Exactly. And it's very dependent on the policy and on the rider. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just like most insurance policies where there's all sorts of bells and whistles that you can
Mm-hmm.
say, I want this, I want this, I want
Mm-hmm.
that. And so that amount really depends, and it depends on when you need to click it on too. Because
Right.
like most insurance policies, your ability to access some level of it changes based on how long you've carried that policy.
That's right. That's right.
So there's pros and cons to it. It's still not inexpensive. I would say $5,000 to $10,000 is not out of the realm of possibility for annual premiums on these types of policies. So that's nothing to sneeze at in terms of an annual expense, but
It is not, but when you consider the cost of long-term care,
mhm,
if you're going to go into active retirement, I think in our community it's going to be what, 3,500 to 4,500 a month.
mhm,
And if you're in assisted living or memory care, you're nudging up. 1 month is going to cost you probably what a year's premium
premium.
would
Mhm,
cost.
yeah.
Easily,
Yeah,
easily,
maybe more, right? I
maybe
think 10
more.
to
Yeah,
12,000 is pretty average around our area for memory
yeah,
care
yeah.
per month. And
Right,
that's yeah,
right.
that is
And in other places, it can be a lot higher.
Yeah.
So that's a neat option actually. And then if the person passes
Mhm.
before the um, the policy is depleted, the value of the policy is depleted, then the beneficiaries get whatever's left, but it
Yeah.
hasn't come, they haven't had to step up and take money out of their savings or out of
Mhm.
their life or have mom move into the bedroom, you know.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Right. And
yeah,
it's also, we talked about this in one of our other
yeah,
videos about the value of having pots of money for different
yes,
purposes. And
yes,
this really does create a pot of money
yes.
that is not something that you have to worry about. Oh, I accidentally spent too
Mhm,
much and now we're here and there's nothing you can do about it.
mhm,
You don't have
mhm,
to worry about, your whoever the heirs are saying, well,
mhm,
wait, let's
mhm.
put mom in like the C
Yes,
place because we want to have more
yes,
inheritance,
yes,
right? It's
yes.
all
I
coming.
have seen that happen.
Yeah, right.
And
And
it's
so it kind of
awful.
removes some of
Yeah,
that, which is
yeah,
helpful.
yeah. Well, that's great. That's great. What else do we want to talk about in this segment?
I think the other thing to think through for your own personal planning
Mm-hmm.
and one of the questions I often ask my clients is there a history of cognitive decline in your family?
Uh-huh.
And I mean, by that, I mean not necessarily average aging decline that we all experience, but
Mm-hmm.
rather dementia, Alzheimer's, those
Mm-hmm.
kind of things that are very unfortunately hereditary,
Mm-hmm.
because that can help you make a determination. If you say yes to a parent, or maybe that's the person you were caregiving for,
Mm-hmm.
you again have just such an acute knowledge of how challenging that time can be, and that might drive a decision to say, maybe I do want to be in a retirement community with graduated levels of care
Yes. Yes.
in-house
Yes.
versus
Yes.
trying to stay in my home and knowing that that can be quite a
Yes.
challenge with those severe
Yes.
diagnoses as they
And
progress.
I have seen with so many of my friends that they have soldiered through
Mm.
taking care of their spouses at the expense of their own health.
Yes.
And then when the spouse dies, it's like everything that they've been, just pushing this aside, pushing it aside and ignoring it. Well, then it just seems to overtake them
Yes.
and overwhelm them. And they've had some pretty serious physical decline
Hmm.
afterward. And so I think that's another reason. And of course, they're older.
Yeah.
It's not unusual to care for somebody with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's for 10, 15 years.
And it's very hard to know when
Yeah.
like we just talked about earlier, is there's more finite
Mm-hmm.
definitions when you're
Mm-hmm.
working with a professional in-home caregiver or a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in a retirement community. And when it's family, it can be very hard to know when it's time to bring in more help. I
Mm-hmm.
had one client, I'll tell this quick story before we wrap up. I had one client who cared for her husband for 15 years through his progressive dementia.
Mm-hmm.
And they moved into one retirement community that they vetted really well, that they knew had a memory care unit.
Mm-hmm.
And as his needs continued to progress, and she was starting to look at what the potential was, the wait list for that memory
Oh
care unit was so
no.
long that they ended up moving to a different retirement community
Oh no.
into a two-bedroom apartment because she didn't want to have too many transitions at once.
Yeah.
And then caring for him got harder and harder and harder. And we had conversations really regularly about how are you? And she was going to support groups and doing all of the things that
Mm-hmm.
you want to have caregivers do.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until we sat down with her estate planning attorney and started to go through sort of the line by line documents that needed to be updated as to factor in some of his new decline, that she started to realize just what a toll it had taken on her because she'd just been the caregiver for so
Yes.
long.
Yes.
So then that conversation sparked the willingness to consider him moving into memory care, which meant her
Mm-hmm.
another move to an apartment, a one bedroom apartment. So this poor couple has moved three times
Big
in
time.
the last 10 years while battling and dealing with
Yeah.
caregiving and battling this disease. It was not ideal in her in retrospect, and I think it very much took a toll on her. She admits it. Moving like that and those transitions causes a mental fog that takes a
Yeah.
while to settle down. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
true
Yes.
result. I'm sure you have experience with
Oh,
that in terms of
see
your
it all of the
daily health.
time.
Yeah,
So what if we were to, this is hard conversation.
it is.
If we were to leave people with a little bit of hope here, let's say, what can you do? What are the proactive steps that you can take now, so that you don't have to worry about this? And when things do get to the point that you can no longer take care of a person, or when you yourself get to this point where you know somebody needs to be helping you,
Yeah.
what can we do now to make sure that those things are in place?
I think as much as possible, being proactive with our decisions
Mm-hmm,
is ideal. So
mm-hmm,
if we can do that vetting, again, well, just like you said, when we're of sound mind, popping in
mm-hmm,
unexpectedly to these
mm-hmm,
places, getting a
mm-hmm,
tour. So getting some idea of where you might
mm-hmm,
go,
mm-hmm,
even if you plan to stay in your home for a while.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
getting some ideas of what your choices might be, because I really think that biggest gift we can give to our future selves is that knowledge and retaining that agency as
mm-hmm,
long as possible. And that's how we
mm-hmm,
do it is with
mm-hmm.
pre-planning.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And whatever that looks like, whether that is an insurance policy that can be used to pay for long-term care, whether it's a long-term care policy, whether it's knowing you have enough money. I read somewhere, and it's been a while, that a baby boomer should probably plan on needing $2 million to get through the end of their life.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's factoring in, I think, a significant term of long-term care. But it's like,
Mhm.
this it's very possible that, if you develop dementia sometime in your 60s and you live until you're 90, it's going to take a lot of money to take care of you.
Yeah.
So,
We're
oh,
all living longer.
I wanted to end this on a positive note.
Give yourself a future gift, I guess is the positive note. Like
Yes,
you can,
yes.
while you,
Plan it now while
yes,
you have the cognitive ability and a team, that can help you put this plan together, because you don't have to you don't have to stay awake every night or wake up at 3 a.m. worrying about what's going to happen
yes,
to you in the future if you do this now. So
there you go.
that's awesome. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Again, I'm Elaine Sanchez, founder of Caregiver Help. I'm with Brenna Baucum, and you are the founder of Collective Worth Planning
Correct.
and a certified financial planner. So thank you so much. This was great information, and I'm so thankful that you're here to help us.
Thank you.
Okay, see you soon.